Great. All right. So, as I said, welcome to the info session for the Master of Arts in Educational Transformation at Georgetown University. My name is Ann Musica. I am the program manager for the program. So I handle things from recruitment to admissions, student support, faculty support, that kind of stuff. I will be starting us off today to talk about the program. And then I'll be handing it over to my colleagues to talk about our program concentrations, and we'll all introduce ourselves in a bit. So we're going to go over, it is this evening for me, it is 5 p.m. in Washington, D.C. Don't know what time it is for all of you, but this evening we will be going over who we are, our program overview, our admissions overview, and then any questions you all might have. So I would like to first introduce you to our team. Professor Sabrina Wesley Nero. Sabrina, could you give us a wave? Is our director of the program. Professor Kristen Sinclair. Kristen, give us a wave. Is our assistant program director. Mingju Deng is an assistant professor of teaching in the program. Kevin Donnelly, also an assistant professor of teaching in the program. And then me, I mentioned Ann Musica. I am the program manager, so I'm the staff member for the program. So one of the things we want to cover today is who we are as a program situated within Georgetown University. So our program launched in 2017 as part of Georgetown's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and we are the first program at Georgetown to offer a U.S. teaching license, which is very exciting. We're designed for graduate students who are interested in ensuring that all children in the K-12 school system in the U.S. have the opportunities and the resources needed to thrive in their educational environments. We're committed to ensuring that our graduate students have the knowledge, the skills, the foresight, the competence, and the understanding to transform education in the United States, whether that's in the classroom as a classroom teacher, whether that's through policy and advocacy work, whether that's through community advocacy work, whether that's through educational research and policy, however that looks for you. Our program model integrates experiential learning with rigorous coursework through applied research and then residency-based experiences. And we'll talk about the research experiences and the residency experiences as we talk about each concentration. I'm now going to turn it over to Professor Wesley Nero, our director, to talk about our program commitments.
Hi, everyone. So our graduate program extends Georgetown University's Jesuit principles to the study of education and the preparation of the next generation of education leaders. Our program is grounded in 4 commitments. Systemic thinking, in that we take an interdisciplinary approach to the study of education and emphasize how intersecting systems historically and within our current context can work together to reinforce and disrupt inequitable educational experiences and outcomes for all learners. We also approach our work with our students and partners with an asset-based, culturally relevant, and sustaining approach, and we equip our students to do the same within their context they wish to work. This means developing culturally and linguistically sustaining pedagogical practices with learners, culturally and linguistically sustaining collaborations with families and communities, and culturally and linguistically sustaining approaches to advocacy and research. Our program prioritizes equity, justice, and subsequently anti-racism. We are clear about our North Star, and we aim to move everyone toward more equitable outcomes by fixing a clear eye on the root of oppression in the U.S. society and public schools. Finally, we embrace experiential learning. Through experiential learning, our students bridge theory, research, and practice, engage in the complexity of applied work, and build connections with professional colleagues to jumpstart their career impact.
Now we're going to go through our program, what our program looks like as a whole, and what our 3 concentrations look like. And I'll remind you this throughout the program that when you apply to our program, you're actually applying to one of our specific concentrations. So be thinking through the presentation which concentration you think makes the most sense for you and your learning goals. So our program, as I mentioned, has 3 concentrations available. One is our advocacy and policy concentration. That's working in education policy, community activism, and advocacy work. Our learning and teaching concentration, you will also see this concentration referred to as the Georgetown University Teacher Residency Program. That is a program designed for you to pursue your teaching license in DC. And the licensure that we offer is to work with English language learners. So it's the ESL licensure. We also have a new concentration we're very excited about called Inquiry and Applied Research, which you'll hear more about in a little bit. That's more focused on research for education policy. Our program is designed as a one-year intensive program. So we start in July and finish in June. You'll see me make that hand gesture a lot to indicate the year that is covered in our program. Our students take courses in July and August, your first summer, the fall semester, so August through December, the spring semester, so January to April, May, and then your second summer, May and June. So you finish the degree in 1 year. We do have a part-time option available where you finish the program in 2 years. So if you're interested in pursuing the program part-time, please let us know. Our program is 30 credit hours or 10 courses spread over the course of 12 months, or if you are in the part-time option, spread over the course of 2 years. In the advocacy and policy and learning and teaching concentration, so both those concentrations, students work at their residency placement during the day. We'll talk a little bit about the residency placement in a minute, and attend their coursework in the evening. For inquiry and applied research, students work on their research experience project outside of course time, and then attend their coursework in the evening as well. Our total tuition is about $65,000, but we do have significant funding available. Some of our unique program offerings. Now, I'm sure you're looking at a lot of different master's programs, a lot of different programs in education. What about us really stands out? So one is that experiential learning that I've mentioned a few times. So you're not just learning in the classroom, you're learning beyond the classroom. You're doing this experiential learning or research experience to supplement the coursework you're doing for your master's. We also have a professional development speaker series, which happens a few times a semester, where we bring in public educators, education researchers, education advocates to either do a panel discussion or a talk that's publicly open to community for people to come, but then is followed by a workshop that's specifically for our students. And that speaker series allows our students to really learn more about the broader field of education outside of what they're learning out of the program, but also what kind of interesting different things you can do with a degree focusing on educational transformation. That's not just being a teacher, although being a teacher is fantastic and we want people to do that, or like being a researcher. One of our other unique offerings is that we are a small cohort-based program. So you are with the same students throughout your time in the program. And as students, you'll develop close relationships with not only your colleagues in the program, but also with your professors because of that small cohort size. So we as professors and as staff, are with you every step of the way and know, what you're working on, what your residency is like right now, what you're thinking about for your future. We're really with you through every step of it to see how you're feeling about the program and what you're thinking about your career in education. I'm now going to hand it back over to Professor Sinclair to talk about our first concentration, advocacy and policy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight, and I'm excited to talk to you about advocacy and policy. So if you are thinking to yourself, I want to become a transformative policy professional advocating for change through government, nonprofits, and community organizations, then A&P might be the right concentration for you. I will say that we sort of conceptualize advocacy and policy, broadly speaking. A significant piece of our program is the residency component that Anne has already talked quite a bit about, where students 20 to 25 hours a week throughout the year in usually paid positions. And those may be anywhere from a government organization office that focuses on education, a nonprofit, a community organizing advocacy group, an education consultant, or other organizations like that. We also take a series of courses, and you can see the sequence here. I will note that the two courses that are bolded, Culturally Relevant Education and Social Justice in Summer 1 and Advocating for Learners and Learning in Summer 2, are courses that folks in all three concentrations will take together. So that's a really powerful opportunity to take classes and learn alongside folks from all of the concentrations. Besides that, I'll just highlight some of the courses that we have in Advocacy and Policy at Critical Empirics in the summer, which gives you a critical lens on data analysis. In the fall, you take policy analysis in education and quantitative analysis in education. In the spring, organizational change in education and intergovernmental relations and accountability in education, and then learning design and assessment policy in the summer. The other course that I haven't mentioned yet, you'll notice, is Policy Residency 1 and Policy Residency 2. That's a year-long course that's designed to do a few things, primarily support your work in your residency placement. So opportunities for you to talk through and debrief what you're learning in your residency placement, hear about what your peers are doing in their placements, help problem solve together, which is really a valuable part of that course. It also supports your career development, and our professional offers a lot of professional development as well. As in addition, that course offers opportunities to build some, I would say, both hard and soft skills related to advocacy and policy work in education.
Professor Sinclair. Now, Professor Donnelly is going to tell us about the Learning and Teaching concentration, also known as the Georgetown University Teacher Residency Program.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you again, everybody, for being here. I'm excited to share a little bit about our L&T concentration. This concentration is really designed for folks who are aspiring teachers or folks who are new teachers with less than 3 years of experience, but who are seeking ELL or ESL licensure. So really, this program is designed to develop your interdisciplinary skills and your asset-based perspectives that are necessary to promote not just effective instructional practices, but equity for children with diverse needs in urban contexts like Washington, D.C. So as an L&T student, your residency aspect of this concentration is working full-time in a public or public charter school in Washington, D.C. as a paid teaching aide under the supervision of a mentor teacher or as a full-time teacher working with multilingual learners. And upon graduation from this concentration, you will be eligible to apply for a K-12 ESL teaching license. As Professor Sinclair mentioned earlier, a fundamental aspect of this is your residency work. So there are 2 courses that you'll take, one in the fall and one in the spring, which are your residency aligned courses. And as Professor Sinclair mentioned, they're really designed to complement and contextualize your residency experiences in conversation with your coursework. But in terms of the course or the concentration specific courses that you'll take as an L&T student, in the summer you take a course called Critical Educational Linguistics, which is really an introduction to the field of educational linguistics and how to apply linguistic theories and research into classroom settings and practices. In the fall, you'll take a class called Creating Productive Classroom Communities, which examines theories and practices of student and family engagement, relationship building, and classroom management, as well as Second Language Acquisition and Instruction, which is a course that looks at second language acquisition and development, and especially the use of quantitative data for equity in K-12 ESL classrooms. In the spring, you take a course called Multilingual Learners in Schools, which examines the interaction between cultural identities and learning in schools, with particular attention to issues of equity for ELs, English learners and multilingual learners, and then language and literacy development in the content areas, which is about the fundamental knowledge of literacy development across content areas in schools. And then in the summer, in addition to the cross-concentration course, you take Critical Perspectives of Child and Adolescent Development, which overviews the fundamental theories of child development and how these theories influence overall well-being for multilingual learners in schools.
Thanks, Professor Donnelly. I'm going to hand it back over to Professor Sinclair to talk about our new concentration, Inquiry and Applied Research.
Hello again, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about the IAR concentration a bit more. So this concentration is designed to respond to contemporary challenges in both advocacy and policy spaces and classroom spaces by training professionals to conduct applied theory-based research that identifies root causes of disparities and evaluates the effectiveness of interventions designed to promote educational equity. In this concentration, you will integrate applied research methods and strategies into your coursework, and you will be able to identify and generate innovative solutions that address persistent disparities in educational access and outcomes. We see that this concentration is focused on applied research specifically, so not just kind of scholarly research that will sit on a shelf, but research you can really apply to advocacy, policy, and classroom spaces. We see that this research will empower potential students, including educators, policy professionals, and research to contribute to a data-informed education landscape. And we're really hoping here to bridge the gap between research and practice to create improvements in schools and communities. So you'll see here that this concentration includes courses from advocacy and policy and learning and teaching, as well as some new classes as well. So again, you'll take those two courses that all concentrations take. You will also take some of the data analysis courses from advocacy and policy, such as critical empirics, data analysis and education, social foundations of U.S. Public schooling in the fall. And then in the spring, you'll have a chance to pick between organizational change in education and multilinguals in schools as one of your courses there. So we have here, in lieu of residency courses that you see in the other concentrations, we have 3 research-based classes, Applied Research in Education 1 and 2, and those courses are designed to introduce you to different methods and approaches in education research, what it means to be a researcher, understanding your own positionality in relationship to that work, thinking through the theories and epistemologies behind quantitative and qualitative approaches to research, as well as community-based and participatory modes of research. All the while you'll be working on a mentor research project, so you actually get to kind of see and experience those approaches to research in real time. And then at the end of Applied Research and Education in the fall, you'll get to propose your own research project, which you will then conduct through the Applied Research and Design and Implementation Studio Lab in the spring. So the experiential component is a little bit different here than the others. While we don't have a formal residency placement, we do for the Applied Research and Education 1 and 2, we'll pair you with a mentor research project to develop those skills and apply them right off the bat.
Thanks, Professor Sinkel. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about the different career paths that this program can take you on. So our students have done basically a little bit of everything. Whatever you can think of in the field of education, our students have probably done it. I have some sample job titles of some of our alumni, but our students do anything from becoming licensed teachers, either in DC or in other states, but many of them stay in DC since that is where our teacher license is registered. We have students who go on to get additional teacher licenses, so they know how to work with English language learners, but they maybe want to specialize in social studies for English language learners, right? We have students who go on to work in education advocacy spaces within the government. So the DC Office of the State Superintendent for Education, they're the ones who run DCPS, among many other things. And so we have, students who work in that office, in the mayor's office, working on education work, on students in the care of DC. We had someone move on to the Office of the Ombuds for Public Education in DC. We have students who work in more administrative positions in schools. So we had a climate and culture dean for a school in our program. We have students who go on to more school leadership roles, even though we are not licensed for school leadership licensures. Our students using their master's degree, using their knowledge either in any of our concentrations, can leverage that knowledge to really move further up in their schools. We have students who work actually in higher education. We're interested in, bridging the access to college, bridging high school to college. We have students who have gone on to law school, gone on to PhD programs, who are interested in education policy, education law, right? So anything you can think of in the education space, our students have probably moved on to it. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the admissions process. So here's our application checklist. This is also available on our website. You will need to apply to this program a completed application form, an application fee. We actually have 3 application deadlines, which I'll mention on the next slide. If you apply by our January 15th deadline, you will not have to pay an application fee. We need a statement of purpose from you. That's about 500 words. For the learning and teaching concentration, that should really be like, what's your philosophy of teaching? Why do you want to be an English language learner teacher, right? For advocacy and policy, talk about your experience in the education policy world, right? What kind of advocacy and activism work do you want to do? For inquiry and applied research, you'll talk about your research interests, right? Like what specific topic in education policy are you really interested in digging into? We have a writing exercise response for all of our students. We used to have a writing sample, which you might see in other graduate programs you apply to, where you just upload a paper that you wrote in undergrad, maybe. We actually decided to switch to a writing response because that gives us a better sense of where prospective students' writing skills are in this moment, and gives you a chance to write more specifically about education. You might have an undergraduate degree in government, but you're interested in education policy and you don't really have a paper that really speaks to your ability to write about education, right? So this writing response allows you to write specifically about education instead. We need an updated copy of your resume or CV. We need 3 letters of recommendation. These recommendations, 2 of them should be from academic sources, so a former professor, someone who's worked with you in an academic context and can speak to what you're like as a student, and then 1 from a professional source. So a former supervisor, if your teacher, maybe your principal or your mentor, right? To give us a sense of what you're like in a work context. We know that some of our applicants have been out of their undergraduate program for a few years, and they might not necessarily have access to a lot of their professors from undergrad. If that is the case for you, please get in touch with me. We can accept 1 academic reference letter and then 2 professional instead, but we do need at least 1 academic reference since this is a graduate program. We will need unofficial copies of your transcripts. You do not need to submit the official copy of your transcript until you are admitted to the program. If your undergraduate degree is from a school where the language of instruction was not English, so maybe you went to university in another country where the language of instruction isn't English, then we will need demonstration of English proficiency. You can show that with either the TOEFL exam or the IELTS exam. And then for the learning and teaching concentration only, you need to either show proof of over a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale in your undergraduate degree. If you have lower than a 3.0, you will need to submit either the Praxis Core exam or the GRE. This is required to get your teaching license in DC. For advocacy and policy and inquiry and applied research, you do not need to submit test scores. As I mentioned, we have a few application deadlines. Our priority scholarship consideration deadline is December 15th. If you apply by our January 15th deadline, your application fee will be waived. And then our final deadline is April 1st. As a reminder, I mentioned that our program starts in July. Right, so that's a little bit of a quick turnaround. So I recommend you apply earlier rather than later. We also recommend that you apply earlier rather than later to increase your chances of receiving merited scholarships from the program. And if you are going to be attending the program on a visa, we recommend applying earlier rather than later so that you have time to get your visa processed before July. Funding the program. This is a question on everybody's mind always. All applicants to our program, no matter what deadline you apply for, are considered for program-funded merit-aid scholarships, but the funding is limited, and we tend to give out larger packages for our earlier deadlines. Learning and teaching applicants are also considered for additional scholarship funding through Project Elect, which is scholarship we have through the Department of Education to train more ESL teachers. For the advocacy and policy and learning and teaching residency experiences, those typically are paid. Not always, but typically are paid. Especially for learning and teaching, you will be an employee of DCPS or a charter school, and so you'll be earning a salary that way. So we just threw a lot of information at you. Please feel free to either put a question in the chat, come off mute to ask your question. I'm actually going to start with a question from Anna, who has put a question in the chat. Thanks, Anna. Anna is wondering when we would hear back about our admissions decision and then when we would have to decide by. That's a great question. We typically will let you know within 2 months of applying to the program, right? So if you apply for the December 15th deadline, you should hear by early February. You'll then have until April 15th to make your decision. If you apply for the April 1st deadline and you apply, on March 29th, you'll have an extended deadline. Your deadline to respond to us will probably be more like May 1st or May 15th. Keep in mind, our program starts the second week of July. So typically the turnaround is 6 to 8 weeks to hear, and then April 15th is the standard response deadline for most graduate programs, and is the response deadline for us. Emma asked the typical DC teacher salary for teachers in this program. Professor Donnelly or Professor Wesley Nero, I would like to turn that over to you.
Sure. I'll take that one. Thanks for that question. DCPS itself has a union-based teacher salary scale that's publicly available on their website. And that is probably what I'll look for it. I'll put the link in the chat. But every charter school is separate and independent. That being said, DC public school teachers tend to be, particularly at the earlier ends of the salary scale, tend to be some of the more highly paid teachers in the DMV region at the first probably 4 to 5 years. I'm pretty sure the average salary is around 65 for a full-time teaching position in their first year. But like I said, I will put the link for at least the DCPS salary scale in the chat. If I don't find it before we finish, we'll follow up with an email for that. Every charter school itself is an independent district legally, so they have their own salary scales and they do not necessarily publish those. And if I didn't completely answer your question, you can actually follow up again in the chat or come off mute.
Corley asked if we could get access to this recorded to watch it again. Absolutely. The recording will be sent to you most likely tomorrow morning. Many of you use Zoom now. It sometimes takes a little bit to process the recording. We also have a question. Is it acceptable to have an experienced English teacher that the applicant has worked with as a paraprofessional write a letter of recommendation? That sounds like a great professional letter of reference. That gives us context for what you are like as an educator, what you're like specifically in the realm of English education, right? So that sounds like it would be a good recommendation for you. If you apply before our January 15th, 2026 deadline, your application fee will be waived. That's a $90 application fee. So if you apply before that date, you will not need to pay that fee. I'm going to pause the questions in the chat for a moment. I see that Ava has their hand up.
Hi, thank you all so much for sharing. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had a question specifically about the advocacy and policy program and the residencies. So for an example of that residency, I'm not sure if you're aware of Ahmed East. It's an international organization that deals with education specifically in West Asia and West Asia and North Africa region. So would that be an example of a residency that a student can hold? And could anyone who's able to maybe speak a bit more about how those residencies are obtained before that process?
Sure, I can answer that question. So I heard a couple of questions from you in that question. one is kind of generally how the residency piece works, right? And then you had a question about this specific organization. So I will say, generally, how the process works is ultimately students are responsible for ensuring they have a residency placement to be in this program. We do have a facilitated matching process that we do in the spring to help connect students to a number of long-term partnerships that we have. And the way that process generally works is that I have conversations with interested organizations that we have partnerships with, and then I have one-on-one conversations with incoming students, and I try to I send a handful of resumes over, and they sort of take the hiring process from there. The students are employees of the residency organizations themselves. We just have to try to help make the magic happen and connect folks to each other. And so in terms of that specific organization, I will also offer that the advocacy and policy concentration tends to be focused on US K-12 public education. So we don't have an international focus in the work that we do. I think if folks have other organizations that we don't have partnerships with that they're interested in working for their residency, that's usually a one-on-one conversation that we have. And then, students are welcome to kind of pursue applying for internships at that organization or whatever other options that they have to make sure that it is a good fit for the program. So I'm not, wouldn't be able to answer that about that specific organization more in depth, but I will offer in general the program focuses on US K-12 public education. So happy if you have more questions, Ava, to answer by email if you'd like.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to pop back to, we have lots of great questions in the chat. What are career services and support like for someone who's currently out of state, for example, California, and looking to return to their state after graduation? Georgetown has a graduate career center for the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences that is available to all of our enrolled graduate students. And I know that the Career Center does come to talk to each of our concentrations, usually in the residency course, about different career options and looking for a job after graduation. I will say that if you are interested in the learning and teaching concentration, then this program might not be the best option for you because it is a program that preps you for teacher licensure in DC specifically. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to do a teacher licensure program in a state that you are not planning to stay in for a certain period of time. Do we have partnerships or relationships with doctoral programs in the DC area?
I can take this question as well. So we have, I will note that Georgetown, as you may or may not already know, does not have a PhD program in education. I will say that we don't have any formal partnerships with PhD programs in the area, but we do have a lot of connections to them. We have a number of our adjunct professors who we've worked with over the years are from University of Maryland's PhD program. We also have a handful of advocacy and learning and teaching students who have gone on to pursue their PhDs, and they are always quite eager to talk to prospective students and current students about their experience in the PhD program, how their time with us has prepared them for that. So I would say our alumni network is a great source of connections to folks who are doing their PhDs, as well as other just relationships that we have locally.
Professor Rossellini, did you want to add anything to that? Or
no, that's great. Professor Sinclair did a great job. And I'm not gonna there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm gonna let you kind of manage the queue and ping us when you're ready.
Do many students continue working at their place of residency after graduation? Some do. Not everyone does, but some do. So for advocacy and policy, your residency position is part-time, so 20 to 25 hours a week. We have had students who have then gone on to have full-time positions with the organization. They've hired into full-time positions, but not always. Part of the point of the residency experience is for you to get your feet wet in the realm of advocacy and policy work. And so you might work, let's say, at a research-oriented think tank and think, actually, after that experience, what I really want to do more is work in local government. right? So then you're going to be looking for a job outside of that space. For the learning and teaching concentration, I believe, and I'm going to look for nods from Professor Wesley-Nero and Professor Donnelly, that our teacher residents, so educational aides or sometimes first-year teachers, are sometimes hired into the schools where they do their residency. Especially for the teacher residents, your school is seeing every day what kind of teacher you are, and they probably want to keep you. So if they have that position availability to hire into, they'd like to keep you often. So I can't guarantee anyone that, like, yes, if this is your residency, this is where you're going to be working for the next 5 years, but it does happen.
I'll also just highlight that one of the benefits of the residency option is that there's no obligation on either person's part. So neither your residency placement or yourself, that you're not obligated to stay past graduation, and they're not obligated to keep you. But you have learned their culture, their practices. And usually if it's something that the graduate wants to pursue and there's an available opportunity, that's been a very common pattern we've seen in our alumni.
I see, thank you, Professor Wesley. I see two different questions that are related to being licensed to teach in other states. So I'm going to read them both. If we are already licensed to teach in another state, would that place us at a disadvantage for the teaching and learning concentration? And then how easy is it to transfer the DC teacher licensure to another state? Answer this in 2 parts. One, if you are already licensed to teach in another state, I would think before applying to this program about how much experience you have. Professor Donnelly mentioned that this program is really designed for either aspiring teachers, so people who haven't had teaching positions before, or new teachers, so less than 3 years of experience. If you got your teaching license through your undergrad and are planning to graduate in May and go straight to grad school, then you're still a new aspiring teacher, right? If you've been teaching in, I'm going to pick a state at random, Michigan, for the past 10 years, it doesn't necessarily make sense to do our specific program if you are interested in getting a DC teaching license, because we're designed for newer teachers. If you're licensed in another state but are still on that new end, it's not necessarily a disadvantage. We have had students in the past who already had their teaching license in, for example, social studies, who wanted to add on the ELL licensure and who wanted to move to DC to teach. So it's not necessarily a disadvantage. It just depends on your situation. And then transferring your DC teaching license to another state. It depends on the state. Some states have stricter rules around their teacher licenses than others. So for some states, it would be very easy to transfer your license. For some, you might need to do additional coursework or additional testing. It really depends on the state.
I'll also add on there about transferring your license. It is easier to transfer your license from one state to another after you have taught in that state. So if you already know that you don't intend to teach in DC after the program, I would also echo what Anne said before, that this may not be the program for you because you will earn a DC license for teaching. If you're like, I'm not ready to commit to DC for the next 15 years, that is reasonable. We're not asking you to do that. So you may say, I see myself in DC for the next few years, then this program could very well serve you well. And if in 3 to 4 or 5 years you decide you want to transfer to another state, again, as Anne mentioned, every state is different, but most of them have some kind of agreement that says how much work you have to do or how little work you have to do to transfer that license.
So we have a couple of questions around tuition and scholarships. So one, I'm going to kind of combine them. What's the maximum amount of scholarship? And has there ever been full tuition granted? We are unfortunately unable to grant full tuition packages. With the level of funding that we have, we endeavor to, for the learning and teaching concentration, it's a little bit different because we have that additional aid through Project Elect, which is our Department of Education grant. So I would say we try to have at least up to 25% of the program covered for advocacy and policy students, and up to 50% of the program covered for learning and teaching, but it's also completely dependent on your application. I can't tell you exactly how much aid you're going to get without seeing your application. So, but I can tell you that we are unable to give full scholarships. There's also the question of, are we required to pay tuition before we start classes? So the way graduate school is structured at Georgetown is that you pay per credit. So in your first summer, that that June and July session, you're taking 2 courses or 6 credits. So you'll pay for those 6 credits that semester. Then in the fall, you're taking 9 credits. You'll pay for those 9 credits that semester. So you pay by semester, however many classes you take. There's a few different ways to pay. Our Office of Revenue and Receivables, which is the office you would be working with to pay your tuition, has different payment plans available. We can also talk about where to apply any merited scholarships that you might earn to figure out when your billing would happen, right? So it's not all due, before you start classes. It's not all due at the end of the program. It's kind of due throughout the program. And we can talk more about Corley, I can talk more offline with you about what a payment structure looks like and what you might be thinking about in terms of the cost of the program, not just with tuition, but outside of tuition as well, like your cost of living and everything. Regarding the supplemental writing for the learning and teaching program, are we allowed to cite the article's content, for example, quotes or paraphrasing? Or should we try to simply respond to the paper in only our own words without citing the article's content? When you say the supplemental writing, you mean the writing response that we have?
Yes.
Great. It's a 500-word response. So if you want to use quotes in it, you can. Make sure they are properly cited. But ideally, you are writing more about your own response to this since it's relatively short. I think I saw Professor Wesley-Nero come off mute.
I'll just emphasize that we are most interested in knowing your thoughts and seeing how you write. And also, citation is not just for direct quotations. So if you write in a way that includes scholarly citations from other people's ideas, scholars you've read and have experience with, I would not stop your writing process from showing that. Everything should have proper citation, right? That's part of what we instill and expect for academic integrity. But you're not expected necessarily to write using other people's or scholars' thoughts. We are most interested in seeing how you think through your writing and really want to see what you know and what you think about the things we are going to examine in the program. And if your writing and thinking process includes scholarly citations, I would not stop yourself from doing that.
Thank you.
How large is each yearly cohort and per concentration? I can speak to this, but I also, if any of my faculty would like to speak to it, I'm happy to have them talk as well, just because I feel like I've been talking a lot and you don't necessarily need to hear from me. But I am happy to talk about our numbers. Okay, I'll take it. So typically, our program as a whole is between 20 and 25 students. Now, our inquiry and applied research concentration is new this year, so I'm talking about just learning and teaching and advocacy and policy. I mentioned earlier, we try to keep this program small because we are trying to do that individual support with you and have that cohort-based program where you're really getting to know each other and your faculty, right? We typically have per concentration, 8 to 10 for learning and teaching, 10 to 15 for advocacy and policy. We are aiming for roughly the same numbers for inquiry and applied research as well. So this is a smaller program because of that one-on-one support that we give all of our students. Relatedly, I'm wondering how competitive this program is, generally speaking, and specifically the learning and teaching concentration. I would urge you not to think of admissions to the program as competitive or competition. I understand why you're asking that question, but I urge you not to think of it as a competition of 100 people apply, we're only going to accept 50 and then only 20 can come, right? Think of it instead as, is this the right fit for me? What we are more concerned about is this program the right fit for you? Will it help you achieve your goals? Than, we're shutting the door at 50 people, right? So we don't have exact numbers on like our admission, we don't publish numbers on our admissions rate, on how many applications we normally get, because it really depends year to year and what kind of cohort of applications we're getting. If accepted, is there a guarantee that we will get a placement if we are unable to find one on our own? Could you speak to that process a little bit, specifically for the advocacy and policy concentration?
Sure, I will. I can answer that. So, like I said, that we have a number of long-term residency partners who often hire students from our program year in and year out. And so we take a sort of a first attempt to match folks with those. And if you're not successful in that, we provide a lot of support in helping you find one. A placement through other relationships that we have as a program, or reaching out to particular organizations that you're interested to. Ultimately, it is your responsibility to find one. So we encourage folks to be looking for programs on their own, in addition to the support that we provide you as well.
And then I think this is the last question, but no rush if it's not. If in addition to US K through 12, we are also interested in international education, advocacy and policy, and higher education, would you recommend this program?
I can take that question again. So again, I think I would just go back to the question about fit that Anne mentioned, and that our coursework in advocacy and policy and across the program in general focuses on US K-12 education. That's most of our readings are focusing on that the context. Most of our, pretty much entirely all of our residency placements are focused on that context. And so while there is space in the curriculum for you to, pursue papers or topics or projects that may be in other settings, in general, sort of the frameworks that we're going to talk about are focused on the US K-12 setting. I will say, if you are interested in kind of the transition to college, right, that higher education piece may be a good fit for you. But I would ask you to think about sort of what is the content area that I want to learn? What are the skills and frameworks that I want to build through my graduate education? And is this program going to be the best fit for me?
Right. I'm going to give it another couple minutes if anyone either wants to add another question to the chat or come off mute. I've switched to the slide that has my contact information on it. This will also be included when I send you all the recording. So if you don't manage to get it down now, don't panic. But you can email me, you can call me if you would like to meet with me, either in person or on Zoom. You can use my Calendly link to book a time with me. My default meetings are on Zoom, but if you are in DC and you're able to be on campus at Georgetown and would prefer to meet in person, I can try to arrange that for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your guys' time, and this was very helpful.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.